I'm not necessarily gonna lie. The more I kind of look at games now that's newly being made of the bigger studios, the more I kind of realize how much I kind of hate them, right? Or at least I don't really vibe with it just immediately, you know? And very few games would I be like, oh, I gotta get that day one because that's looking amazing or something is interesting when it comes to it, right? If the game is new or if it's something I never really touched upon, and if the story is catching, I'll go for it, right? But if it's not anything with the story that I'm interested in, and if the characters don't even look good, and it just looks very, boring, and it looks like every other game, I really won't ever go for it. Because the biggest, I would say, three problems from me personally that kind of sucks a lot in gaming, not talking about gameplay wise of anything, would be basically the realistic looking characters, because every time every game comes out that's new, that's AAA, has to have it for some reason. Then you also have the female characters that look incredibly ugly than they used to, which is also strange and weird. And then even if they're not necessarily ugly, half the time you get voice actors that don't necessarily, I would say, do a lot of good work, especially on the English dub side. And then, obviously, one of the other ones that we talked about was Skullgirls, the fan service, because of course I had to bring it up. But when it comes down to things, let's talk about the first one, the realistic looking games, because this is probably the reason why so many games are going to become, $70 and whatever as time kind of goes on. And it's like, it doesn't have to be this way, right? You do realize different video games can come in different shapes and sizes and graphics and what it's supposed to be, right? Not every game has to be the most challenging, realistic engine model to ever exist. And if you want to challenge that, fine. If you want to try to make something that looks realistic, okay, that's cool. But not every game has to flow that way. There is something called style, which is a lot of games that, what it has lacking in a lot of games recently, right? It's just like, you can have a game that looks fake as shit and it still be good. Or have an engine going on to that game and it's not necessarily the most realistic looking thing in the world, but it still looks good enough because the style complements it, right? Like, you don't need to keep making so many high level detailed texture skins for these characters, or for a lot of the stuff that they have to do with, like, blood and flesh and all this type of stuff, right? Like, there's certain aspects that you should put money into, like hair, because sometimes hair look like shit and they be flopping all over the damn place, and clothing, right? Sometimes you need to put that in clothing because sometimes, again, the clothing be flopping all over the damn place with terrible physics and other things as well. But like, not every game has to go for that, right? Like, look at something like Dragon Ball Z with fighters, right? That game looks fine. It looks fake as hell, but guess what? The game sold pretty damn decently. It sold pretty damn well. Much less, people still play the shit out of that game. Or look at something that has, like, not a super cartoony style, but like a style of it where it's like, oh, you can tell it's fictional as hell. Something like Killer Instinct. People still want it to play like Killer Instinct still, and that's like a thing, right? Yeah, it has characters that look somewhat realistic, but it's not that overly realistic looking, right? And this game was made with a budget in mind, so it doesn't need to go into a realm of like what Mortal Kombat 1 or 11 is doing, right? It doesn't need to do that. So it could just go in the routes of doing what it wants to do, just not with a whole bunch of realism into it. I remember there was like a post somewhere where Capcom was talking about how games are being really expensive to make, so they might have to go into prices of it. And it's like, no, you don't necessarily have to do that, because if you just made the games less realistic, I get why you did it this time with Street Fighter, because yeah, Street Fighter 4's art style wasn't necessarily the greatest thing in the world. 5 was, I would kind of argue and say, just a little bit worse, honestly, with certain characters like Ken, because he looked like absolute shit. And Street Fighter 6, yes, he looked way better, totally amazing, 100%. And I get it, right? But at the very same time, not every Street Fighter has to look exactly like 6. Not every Street Fighter has to look realistic. They can have their own styles like 4 and them did. Or they can be on the same kind of level like Third Strike maybe, or something like that. Maybe not a new Street Fighter like that, because I'm pretty sure people will be pissed. but you can do stuff with that concept, right? And hell, you can kind of even look at something like KOF. KOF don't look like the most realistic thing. It looks insanely stylized, but you know, that's kind of like the thing. You can do that with a game that looks like that, and then you can also save money by not going out and getting the most realistic thing ever. So you can find ways to save money to make a game. Not every game has to be like that. Look at Undertale. That game is like one of the most well-known, popular-ass games of all time. A cult classic for a lot of people. And was it the most realistic-looking game? No, it was literally some 16-bit looking ass thing, yet they made it work in some shape and form. And that's great. So I'm not saying like get rid of realism as a whole, just do other things, because there's plenty of other games that doesn't necessarily use realism at all and they work fine. There is no excuse for somebody to be trying to raise the prices just because of that, right? So that's like one other thing, you know. And we can even bring up the talking about like bigger gaming spaces of how the worlds are and whatever, but we'll cross that bridge maybe later on. Anyway, so we go into the female characters, because this is by far one of the biggest egregious crimes that's been done in recent memory, because it doesn't make sense. Why does every female character have to be ugly? I don't really know. This kind of goes on to the realistic topic of things, because again, not every female character has to be like that. Just because we look stupid and ugly and boring doesn't necessarily mean that they should have to, right? And they didn't for like a long ass time, even in like 16-bit games, or even in like other ass games that's like been in the past. A lot of characters look fine the way they were. A lot of characters had different styles about them and all that type of stuff. Yet now everybody looks the same. Everybody feels boring as hell, and everybody hits the same type of tropes, especially in the West, if you know how they write their female characters, because they just do the most boring, non-fun things ever, I guarantee you. Like, I'ma just keep it a stack with you. No one wants this shit, and you can't really fix it either. Even when Genshin had Aloy into the game, to be honest, no one plays Aloy, and I'm gonna be very honest with you when it comes down to things, you can't fix it. Like, I don't care how nice her model might look now, that doesn't change where she comes from, honestly. Like, it really just doesn't, and that's why she's like the least played character in the entire game. So, when it comes down to things, it's just like, not every single character has to be ugly, honestly. And then people want to get mad when there is a game that actually does have really nice looking female characters, or cast of characters, honestly, just in general, and then they get mad about it because it's everywhere. But dude, have you not seen the amounts of games that doesn't look all that great? Very few of them with realistic graphics look decent. Like, you know, Street Fighter is pretty damn good with the realistic graphics. Tekken 8 looks pretty damn decent, honestly. But like, I'ma just keep it for real with you. A lot of those games that has no style and just go on a realistic route, they don't look all that great with their female characters. So it's not surprising to see Genshin be popping up every single place and be spammed every place in existence, or Honkai Star Rail, or whatever other games that is out there with these type of looks and, you know, styles. Because it's just like, yeah, these are kind of the only things that really look good right now. No one really else, outside of, again, maybe something of the level of Street Fighter, or maybe something of League of Legends, or potentially something of Overwatch, right? Those games are a bit different, because at least they have a style to their games, or they have some type of aspect to it where it's not completely 100% realistic. And it's really not surprising to see why so many people try to go to indie games and try to, you know, see what's on the market there, because again, everything looks boring and everything looks ugly when it doesn't have to be that way. There is no reason for it. And they just want to make sure everybody's just inclusive when it comes down to things, and it doesn't need to be the case, right? If you don't like it, you just don't like it. At the end of the day, that's what it is. And then obviously the last thing we have to bring up is fan service, which this kind of goes into both of those points of what I have, even though people might be like, you're just making up a reason to get added in here. Kinda, but also not really, because if you really think about it, some of these characters were purely designed to be straight up like sex appeal just to sell the game. Like Mortal Kombat, obviously, with Melina. when you look at the history of Melina, obviously the only thing that they had for her was that she is basically literally the term deception. You're thinking, oh, she's fine as hell, I'm about to get in all that. But then you see the mouth and she's about to bite your damn arm off, literally. Then you're like, oh, I don't want this no more. That's the point. She was supposed to be deceptive. Now they're like moving away from that, and now it's like, oh, Melina is a regular person, which is cool to see. But still, it's just like, now we're moving away from all that when it wasn't necessary, or it should have been that way, right? And also now Melina is for the girls for some reason when she has literally never been that. So that's a bit strange, right? And what about all the bullshit with her basically trying to, woo Liu Kang sometimes? Like, so we're just gonna ignore that shit? Like, that feels weird. And also with her outfit, it's a bit conservative. I'll just be completely honest, right? Even though someone's like, well, she has a massive booba cleavage, how can you say that? Well, to be honest, we've seen hotter fits. I'll even argue the MK11 fit that she had was a bit better than what she had here, right? I'd argue that even the MK10 fit was a lot better than what they try to put her in MK1, right? And that one's more of a combat ready, more so of a different, like, savage, wilder version of Melina, if I'm being honest with you, right? And nothing's topping NK9, right? Nothing is topping NK9. There's like another previous outfit that she had that was really damn good. Like, I think she had like, I don't know, like a Chinese princess or something at one point in time, and that was a really good outfit too. But like, nothing's topping those two, mainly because that's what people remember. That's what people really like, and it's stupid not to give them what they want. You know how many people would sell out their money so fast to just see Melina in MK1 in that outfit with no changes? They would want that shit. They would. In a game where literally we're killing our opponents, why not make it sexy with it too? Like, you might as well go just across the board crazy, but they don't, and it's so weird. And then you have games that does exist where fan service is fine and it's allowed, but then either the company itself or the devs themselves basically ruin that experience. Skullgirls was like one of them, where obviously we talked about that situation where they basically made everybody's clothes longer and made extra lines in places where things was exposed. Now it's like, oh, we can't show that no more. So that's like a thing, and that's really annoying. Or we just changed the colors of the different, like, panties of the different characters and whatever, and that's like a thing, and that doesn't make sense. And obviously you see things like, DOA, who basically try to hide those outfits and basically try to make everybody look, more conservative and clothed up, and it just did not work at all, and it made everybody look very boring and shitty, honestly. Then obviously you have games that just flat out used to be like fully for everybody to see, with the girls in their, asses out and everything, but now taking that away, like Senran and Kagura, which was the start of basically everything being censored, and it's ridiculous. So when it comes down to things, there's just a lot of stuff that sucks about games now that could easily be changed, and there's no reason for it to have changed in the first place, but it just does. And we obviously know why, because of California. Easily the biggest reason why a lot of this stuff is happening in the gaming space that sucks, right? A lot of the easy reason why, because it doesn't make a lot of sense, because everybody has to be in a strange type of position of their character, whether of sexuality and whatever. Everybody has to be basically ugly as shit now, and if there is a game where you're having fun and it's stylized and they're having a little bit of flirty play there, now you gotta take all that out or remove it entirely, or you're just gonna get banned on the thing or whatever. Like, you just can't have fun creating a game anymore, which is why you see a lot of people just kind of create stuff online and have it for PC mainly, but even those are starting to try to, get pushed away and all that sort of stuff. And again, it's very stupid at the end of the day. So my whole point is that if you take anything from this, it's essentially just regarding games as a whole, just, you don't have to make everything realistic. You don't have to make every character ugly as shit, and you don't have to be so damn appealing towards everybody regarding how people feel now. Because here's the thing, you can try to do that, but think about it like this. As I said before in the previous video regarding the history of like lolly and everything, there was a point in time where people liked this sort of shit. And to be perfectly honest with you, just trying to evolve over time with these games, with the people, is gonna piss off way more people than it is gonna help. Because at some point in time, who knows, somebody might make a trans character in the game, and then they might start being like, well, this is offensive because trans people shouldn't have to be in games like this. And then people might agree, who knows. I'm just giving you like a random example. Things like that could happen, and then, oh look, now you have to try to backtrack and go back in time to fix something like that when it was fine the way it was. The point is, fiction shouldn't have to conform to the reality of things. It should be its own thing. That's the reason why it's fiction, right? To put up whatever nonsense that you want to put up in your worlds and whatever. So it shouldn't have to be conformed to the ways of reality. Just gonna keep it a stack. So if you see somebody make a game or have a story or whatever, and if you don't like it, fine. But I guarantee you, someone with that similar mindset of that creator is gonna just continue to make their stuff, and they're gonna make it for whoever enjoys it. And it is what it is when it comes down to things. If they like it, they just like it. If they don't like it, they don't. Simple as that. So that's essentially my biggest issue when it comes to gaming and just in the space in general. So hopefully you did enjoy. If you did, be sure to like, share, subscribe, hit the bell notification or else. Also follow me on, well, I don't have a Twitter anymore because assholes. So we'll figure it out when we get to that bridge, when we cross that. So you just see me whenever. But if you want to see me directly, Patreon is the way, I suppose. So get your Patreon up. And until then, this is boy Jay, sign off. Have a blessed day.